and good evening. You are watching the Policy Times, world's first policy and development media. Whatever activity Policy Times does, it has just one objective to serve, is how through the activity that we do can contribute or we can bring development, prosperity for our own nation, for our own society. We, since last 4 years, have been organizing various talks and discussions on the issues of development, various aspects and dimensions of development. When we talk about development, actually, we need to when we want development, we need to discuss about development. The discussion on development is very important, and we want all stakeholders to talk on that. Now today, I have a very special guest to talk on, because pandemic is something which has done tremendous havoc and damage to the economy, not only in Indian economy but many economies in the world, and in fact all economies of the world. Now the interesting fact is, post pandemic, how economies are recovering is very important. Which economies are recovering better? How fast are they recovering? Now, talking about India, India is one of the largest economies of the world. In all parameters. Now, this data and statistics are very confusing and dicey. That is why I'm not quoting any data. But it is sizably one of the second most populated country of the world, which has the economy is doing fantastic. We are creating a lot of unicorns, a lot of FDI coming, but to big companies or big, for example, Reliance is getting a lot of FDI. Now, what we would like to discuss and understand from the noted economist of India today, we have a special economist, Arun Kumar, who is a Malcolm Fellow and Chair Professor of Institute of Social Sciences. Sir has been working on various fields, especially in the field of economics, since decades, to educate people, create awareness, and also give enough policy dimension and guidance to the nation that how we can achieve complete, comprehensive and inclusive sustainable development for the nation. I will come to Sir. So if Sir can see us, yeah. So I'll come to Sir. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Before we start the conversation, may I request you to kindly give a brief introduction about your work that you are doing and your professional achievement and journey so far.
So, I started off being a physicist, and I was doing my PhD in physics at Princeton University. And then I decided to switch to economics, and I joined JNU and did a PhD in economics. And then I did a study on the black economy for the Center Board of Direct Taxes at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, along with other colleagues there. And then I joined JNU when the post came up in JNU. So I've been there in JNU teaching in the economics department from 1984 till I retired in 2015, from JNU. And since then, I've been a retired person doing more of the same. And I've written several books. The most recent is on the pandemic, the Indian economy's greatest crisis. And then before that was a book on the GST. And before that was a book on demonetization. And all these three have been brought out by Penguin. And before that, in 2017, soon after demonetization, I had a book on black economy. And before that, I'd written a book, a major book on the Indian economy since independence in 2013. And then I had a book before that, edited volume on challenges facing Indian universities, because I've been writing a lot on education. And, I was also the president of the JNU Teachers Association, to try and see how we can improve education in the country and how to face the challenges in JNU. And before that, I had another volume by Penguin in 1999 on the black economy. And that has been, sort of a very seminal kind of work that I did on the black economy, which has been gone through 3 editions since that time. So I've been doing a lot of research on globalization, on public finance, black economy, and things like that. So I've been speaking a lot, in public debate, writing in the newspapers, writing academic articles. So idea is to spread the knowledge on all these subjects.
I think outstanding, sir. I have no word to say the kind of contribution you have done and you're continuously doing, and we wish you all the best in your future, a lot of endeavors. Now, you have mentioned some very attractive, spicy, and interesting, themes on which you have already written book, whether it is the post-pandemic, your book on post-pandemic, because each of the themes, whether it is GST, demonetization, black economy, they actually need a separate dedicated session. I would love to have a series of sessions with you, maybe in future, on all of these topics specifically, so that we have some direction in terms of an assessment, what has been the success, and then where are we now, and then what is the future. Maybe we can have extensive discussion on that. Today, let me start the discussion with the very basic and first question. Has Indian economy bounced back, really?
So, we have to look at it from the start of the pandemic. You see, the pandemic means that, it was spreading rapidly. And therefore, to prevent the spread, you have to have a lockdown because it transmits from one person to the other. And when you have a lockdown, that means people cannot go to do any economic activities. So, so roads were empty, environment became very clean. People reported that from Jalandhar, they could see the Himalayas. From, Siliguri, they could see the Kanchenjunga, they could see 100 kilometers away, basically. So the environment had become very clean, showing that, traffic had stopped and, industries had stopped, etc. So that brought down the economy very dramatically in the month of April 2020. Now the economy slowly started recovering. And then, by say January 2021, the economy had considerably recovered, but not fully. Because you see, the Indian economy consists of the unorganized sector and the organized sector. The unorganized sector employs 94% of the workforce, and the organized sector employs 6%. And people in the unorganized sector work with very little capital. So the moment the work stops, they are not able to pay salaries and wages to the workers. And the workers work at very low wages, and therefore they are not able to buy food and supplies. And that's why India was the only major economy where you saw millions and millions of people migrating from urban areas to rural areas. You did not see this picture anywhere else. And that's why the Indian economy got hit very badly last year in April, May, June, till the unlock started, sometime in June. So the economy was way down. Now, compared to that, when you start unlocking, the economy starts recovering. Now, therefore, by January, the economy had considerably recovered, January 2021. But then from February on, we started the second wave. And in the second wave, again, in the month of May, the economy was hit very badly. And May, June, even April to an extent. But April was not as bad as it was when there was complete lockdown in April 2020. So therefore, April, May are better than what they were last year. But the issue is that even though we are seeing 20% official rate of growth, for the first quarter of this year, we are not back to the 2019 level of GDP because we had declined by 24%. Now, the second point is that, yes, we have recovered to a certain extent, but the point is this data is incorrect because the data for the unorganized sector is not collected every year. The data is collected only once in 5 years. And therefore, what we assume is that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the unorganized sector. Now, that was the correct assumption before the demonetization and the shock to the economy. But since then, this method is not right, that we represent the unorganized sector by the organized sector. Because the unorganized sector got hit very badly, in 2020 and now again in 2021. This time the disease went into the tier 2, tier 3 cities, into rural areas. A lot of people became sick. The number of deaths were very large. The sickness was very large. So work got affected. Now that data is not captured by the official data. So when the government says that the economy grew by 20% in Q1 of this year, my argument is it probably grew by more like 5%. And last year when the government says it declined by 24% in April, May, June, my argument is it declined by something like 45%, where the unorganized sector data is not there. And I'll give only one example of how the data is incorrect. You see, last year, for instance, in Q1 in 2020, it was said that agriculture grew by 3%. Now that is incorrect because we all know that half of agriculture now is floriculture, pisciculture, horticulture, milk production, poultry, etc. Now we know that milk production came down because the demand for milk came down. The weddings did not take place, entertainment did not take place, hotels, restaurants were closed. So even the milk demand came down. Then poultry sector suffered because people stopped eating chicken They were worried that, chicken will cause infection. So large number of chicken were culled. The eggs demand came down because 1 crore eggs are supplied to the midday meal scheme. And because the schools had closed down, so therefore the 1 crore eggs were not selling. So therefore, the poultry also came down. Then flowers did not come to the urban markets, and therefore they rotted in the field. Half of the vegetables and fruits rotted in the field. You had reports like from Azadpur Mandi that the fruits and vegetables coming to the Azadpur Mandi were less than half of what they were coming in 2019. So the rest was rotting in the fields, So in other words, you see, the agriculture sector also declined by at least 10%. And in the data that the government uses, it simply assumes that the targets have been achieved. Now we know that the targets were not achieved as far as milk is concerned, poultry is concerned, flowers are concerned, horticulture is concerned, etc. So therefore, the data being incomplete is not giving the correct picture of the growth of the economy. So this is a big problem with our data, that the data for April, May, June of 2020 was not correct. So therefore, the growth rate calculation for 2021 will also not be correct. So when the data is incorrect, then our data is, the rate of growth calculation, etc., goes wrong. Then the unorganized sector, for instance, the CMIE showed that the unemployment was 122 million people who lost employment. That means a large number of people in the unorganized sector lost employment. 17 million people in the organized sector lost employment. 5 million professionals lost employment. And then many people who did not lose employment, their salaries were cut, So the work stopped for a large number of people, So I have been arguing that we have to distinguish between work and employment. You see, suppose I'm a factory worker. So I will say I'm employed, but I'm not going to the factory. So I'm not working and my salary is not coming. Okay. So my estimate is that 200 million people lost work because the unorganized sector completely stopped, So it's not 122 million who lost employment. It's 200 million people who did not work. And your GDP depends on this work. If people are not working, then GDP is not going to be produced. Production will not take place. So that's why the production was hit much more than what the official data is revealing. So this problem is that the unorganized sector is not being captured by our GDP data. And therefore, the economy was hit far more last year, and it's hit again far more this year. And we have not been able to go back to the 2019 level. Now, the fact also is that even before the pandemic, the economy was being hit by the fact that the unorganized sector was declining. And that was not being captured. But even if you go by the official data, the economy had been slowing down for 8 quarters. The rate of growth had dropped from 8% to 3.1% in the quarter just before the pandemic. So the crisis of the unorganized sector had already been building up even before the pandemic. And that crisis built up even further after the pandemic. So in other words, when we say whether the economy is bounced back, whether it has recovered, it has not recovered back to the 2019 level, So the recovery will still take time, and the data has to be correct to know whether the unorganized sector is recovered or not. The organized sector can recover, but the unorganized sector is where the problem really lies, That is where 94% of the employment is. And of this, about 94%, about 45% of the workforce is in the agriculture sector. So even the agriculture suffered because a lot of people became sick, etc. this year, in the second wave. So even agriculture would suffer, but because the rainfall was good, etc. So therefore the crop may not be less, but the point is the people, the workers suffered. And the number of workers in the agriculture also has increased because people have migrated from urban areas to rural areas, not being able to find work. They have simply declared themselves agriculture workers, There was already a lot of disguised unemployment in agriculture. That disguised unemployment has increased. And secondly, the rural employment guarantee scheme, the demand there has increased, because people need some work. So rural employment guarantee scheme also has, the expenditure there has gone up, showing that, the people have not been able to recover back to where they were. So in other words, the recovery, yes, it is better than what it was earlier. That no doubt that the Q1 of this year is better than the Q1 of last year, but it is not that we have recovered back to 2019. And there's still quite a way to get back to that, especially in services sector. Services sector was hit because there you have to work in close quarters. So whether it be transportation, whether it be hotels, whether it be restaurants, or whether it be other services that are there, where you need people to be in contact with each other, all those were hit very badly. And they are the ones that have not fully recovered as yet. And that will still take some time. Second point is that you see, when you have unemployment, then demand comes down. When people lose income, and according to one survey, 95% of the workers said that they had lost income. So even though, as I said, unemployment may have been only for, say, 122 million according to CMI study, but far more people lost income. And because they lost income, their demand has come down. So therefore, there are two kinds of sectors in the economy, the organized sector and the unorganized sector. Organized sector can recover better. And within the organized sector also, there are two sectors. One that are doing very well because of the pandemic, and other which are not doing so well because of the pandemic. So like in the services sector. So you have technology companies, you have telecom companies, you have pharma companies, FMCG companies that are doing very well. And that's why you see in the stock market a boom in all these, because there's a lot of liquidity in the market. And in the US and Europe also, there's a lot of liquidity released by the banks. And that liquidity is looking for some return. So where will it invest? Because in the US, the interest rate is zero, in Europe it's zero, in some places it's negative. In India, at least you're getting 4, 5, 6% return. So therefore, money has flooded into the Indian stock market, both Indian money and the money from abroad. And that has boosted the stock market. Then technology companies in the US have done very well, whether it be Google or Facebook or other such companies, and they're flush with funds. They are investing in India, unicorns, and investing in, Geo and the other technology platforms. So that money started coming in last year. So Reliance, which was the most indebted company in February 2020, became debt-free by the time it became August 2020 because so much capital was flowing in. They got billions of dollars from, Facebook and other such technology companies. So there is an attempt, by technology companies globally to invest in India. So it's not because we are doing very well, but they want to capture the companies that are doing well in the technology sector so that they can expand further into India. So there are two kinds of companies, one that are doing very well because their demand has increased, and others, those are not doing so well. So in the organized sector itself, there's a split between those companies that are doing very well and those companies that are not doing very well. So in the Indian economy, if you see, there's a split between in the organized sector, there's a split between the organized and unorganized sector, and there's a split between, agriculture and non-agriculture. So there are different kinds of divisions that are there in the Indian economy.
I think you have, comprehended almost all and touched upon almost all important aspects to discuss on the topic. And I think you have very justifiably, covered almost all. So now, again, there are so many questions that I have to ask you, but I will stick to a couple so that, we can continue this series in future. You have talked a number of times about the unorganized sector. So I'll just talk about, we'll specify this a little because you have also touched the stock market, and which was my next question actually, which you answered very nicely, and how this is why the trend, why it is happening. Now the question is, sir, we had GST implementation, we had demonetization, all these big reforms being done in India so that our unorganized sector narrows down and our organized sector grows up. So that was the whole intention, and also to capture the black money, or to arrest the black money. So these were the three core reasons for which GST as well as demonetization was brought in. My question to you on this context, that 70% of India still lies in the rural in Bharat or India. So there are a couple of connotations from the question, basically sub-questions within that. Number one, why are we still struggling with informal sector or unorganized sector? Are we not able to narrow down the informal sector and unorganized sector? Are we not able to still convert the unorganized sector into organized sector? Then if even after, despite such massive historic reforms, we can't transfer or convert the unorganized sector into organized sector, then what can it do? What kind of reforms then we actually need to convert the unorganized sector to? Because I think a huge number of solutions lies within this. If you can convert unorganized sector into organized sector, a lot of things can be eased out. So your view.
So I think, you see, the question itself is incorrect. The unorganized sector exists because our organized sector is not generating employment. organized sector is highly mechanized and automated. So, if you look at the economic survey data, then in 1990, the organized sector employed something like 25 million people out of a workforce of about 270 million people. Okay. And now, if you look at the thing, we are employing about 32 million people, whereas the workforce has become almost 500 million. So you see the 250 million additional people who have come into the workforce, only about 7-8 million people have gone into the organized sector, the rest are in the unorganized sector. So it is the nature of technology which is causing this kind of growth, where the organized sector cannot absorb much labor. It's getting highly automated. And the automation during the pandemic has increased even further. So for instance, you can see that large number of the middle class and the upper classes have shifted their purchases to e-commerce. They're not going to the brick and mortar stores in the neighborhood because they're scared. So therefore, this sector has grown enormously, the e-commerce sector, and the neighborhood brick and mortar stores, they are declining. And therefore, that is the reason why the unorganized sector in the brick and mortar sector will continue, because the employment generation in the e-commerce sector will be very small compared to the employment that will be displaced in the unorganized sector in trade. Okay. Similarly, you see other sectors, you see manufacturing, you see agriculture, for instance. Even in agriculture, the automation is massive in the last 30 years. There are more tractors, more harvester combines, more threshers. So therefore, even agriculture is not generating employment. You see, so where will the people go? And that's why there's large amount of disguised unemployment in agriculture. So if there is this kind of unemployment, people are doing residual work. So if people go from rural area to urban area, what do? They'll do headload work, they'll drive a rickshaw, they'll push a cart, they'll do some such unorganized sector work, So what you see is that the unorganized sector being large is a result of the fact that the organized sector is not generating employment. It is highly automated. And therefore, if you think that demonetization will lead to unorganized sector becoming organized, that's not going to happen. The demonetization was premised on the wrong premise that black means cash, or that the black economy is generated in the unorganized sector. Now, the unorganized sector has such low incomes that most of the people in the unorganized sector don't have a taxable income. Their income is below 2.5 lakhs of rupees. And I'll quote you the Delhi Socio-Economic Survey of 2018. The Delhi Socio-Economic Survey of 2018 showed that 98% of Indian families in Delhi spend less than 50,000 rupees per month. Now, these are largely people who are, lower middle class and the poor people, 90% are spending less than 25,000 rupees per month, So they are not in the taxable bracket at all. So whether they declare their income or they don't declare, it doesn't mean that they are evading taxes, Secondly, in the unorganized sector, there are small number of people who are making a lot of money, like dhabas and, such like things, So, but their percentage of that population of the unorganized sector is very tiny. So out of 94% who are in the unorganized sector, maybe 1 or 2% may be having taxable income, but 92% are not having taxable income. So therefore, to say that the unorganized sector will become organized, or that the unorganized sector is the one that's generating black income, these are incorrect statements. You will not be able to convert the unorganized sector into organized sector unless you generate massive employment, and massive employment so that they get some kind of social security. Our unorganized sector does not give any social security. So saying that GST will do it, or this digitization will do it, in fact, it's the opposite. The demonetization hit the unorganized sector very hard, because the cash economy got hit very hard, and the unorganized sector is so tiny that it only works with cash. So when there was a cash shortage, the unorganized sector shut down. Similarly, the GST, you have exempted the unorganized sector, but because you've exempted the unorganized sector and given the GST relief to the organized sector prices have come down, the unorganized sector prices have gone up. So the demand has shifted from the unorganized sector to the organized sector. And again, the crisis of the unorganized sector has taken place. So GST is absolutely the wrong way to convert unorganized sector into organized sector. It is actually damaging the unorganized sector. And you must appreciate that the micro units are 6 crore units, small and medium units are 6 lakh units, and the large units are 6,000 units. So there's a factor of 100 between the large units and small and medium. And from the small and medium to micro, there's another factor of 100, So the micro units, which are the unorganized sector, and they are the ones who suffered because of demonetization, they've suffered because of GST, and they suffered during the pandemic. So therefore, this idea that we can convert the unorganized sector into organized sector, we are going about it the wrong way by doing demonetization or by doing GST or by doing digitization, etc. What we need to do is generate proper employment. If we don't generate proper employment, with social security, then the unorganized sector will remain unorganized. You have to increase the demand. So GST must be completely revamped. The present GST, which is working against the interests of the unorganized sector, and I've been writing on this matter of GST and VAT since 1986. And I've written why VAT and GST will not work in India because of the massive micro sector that exists in the economy. So what we need to do is reform GST and make it a last point tax. If we make it a last point tax and forget all the other things, then the unorganized sector will benefit. Unorganized sector will be able to grow better. Then you see, if in agriculture and in the unorganized sector, we give living wage to the workers, then the demand will go up. At the moment, we don't give living wage. And that's why 95% of the people said that they don't have enough money to buy even 1 week of supply. That means that the 95% of Indian people are not having the income. And as I said, that the Delhi Socioeconomic Survey showed that 90% are spending less than 25,000 rupees per month. And now Delhi per capita income is 2.5 times the per capita of the country. That means in other parts of the country, people are only 90% are earning only 12 or 15,000 rupees. Not earning, but spending 12 or 15,000 rupees per month. So you can imagine that they have no savings, and they have very little cushion to be able to take care of any crisis. So we have to afford all our workers a living wage. A living wage means that they should be having enough for food. They should be having enough for education for children, enough for health. You could see that, for instance, the health system is decrepit, and large number of poor people could not get any medical attention at all in tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, and the rural areas. And those who are living in poor conditions in the slums of the cities, they also could not get proper medical attention, So in other words, you see, unless we give proper wages and increase demand for the unorganized sector, the unorganized sector will remain unorganized sector. Unorganized sector cannot be transformed into the organized sector. All you can do is the organized sector will grow, but the unorganized sector will in fact remain where it is, and demand is shifting from the unorganized sector to the organized sector, and that is creating further crisis for the unorganized sector. That's creating crisis for agriculture. So therefore, this idea that how to convert unorganized sector to organized sector by forcing things like demonetization, GST, and the basic premise of demonetization and GST is incorrect, as far as the Indian economy is concerned. So none of these things will actually work. And I think that is what your question was, how to convert. These are not the steps to able to convert unorganized to organized sector.
I think I come to now the question, like the answer will become my question now, that we need to create massive employment in the organized sector. That is the solution through which we can gradually remove the unorganized sector, right? Now, there are two objectives that are in front of us before the government. One is creating massive employment, because I think we need to create 100 million jobs every month, that kind of figure, or 10 million kind of jobs we have to create every month. From that, we also need to have the pressure deliberately that we need to achieve double-digit growth. Because since the couple of decades ago, when China was growing very fast, China gave a double-digit growth for 3 decades, if I'm not wrong. So data, again, I'll request you to clarify. So if India really want to pull up huge amount of money out of poverty, and the first part is the poverty definition itself is wrong, as you were mentioning about the living wage. Living wage is a completely different parameter of guessing the BPL or below poverty line. Now, how do we create employment? Are we creating enough employment today? So in one parameter, and in one way, we are saying that a lot of unicorns we are creating. Huge amount of FDI is coming. If you see the data, then there is absolute picture that we are creating big MNCs and unicorns, huge money coming. On the other hand, are we creating enough number of jobs? And if we are not, then why this dichotomy? And how do we mitigate the dichotomy? You mentioned about 6 crore, micro engines or micro businesses. Now, how do we empower those micro businesses to become the MSMEs or SMEs, and then become the bigger ones? And we create, so from 6 crore, we need to create 60 crore MSMEs. So what can be the roadmap for that? So this, and then double-digit growth. As I think we are all talking about double-digit growth. Are we really, in a real sense, achieving it? How can we achieve it?
So, you asked actually lots of questions. There's not one question. And I think we need to focus on one issue at a time. Otherwise, we'll not be able to answer all the questions. And as I was saying, it is not through expansion of the organized sector that you will actually achieve. Because organized sector is using high technology and creating very few jobs. So take, for instance, banking. Banking has expanded enormously, but the number of jobs has been halved, after 1991 because of automation. So earlier you used to go into the bank and you used to withdraw money, pay money, get your checkbook filled, get your passbook filled, etc. Now everything is done by machines, So employment generation is not going to take place in the organized sector given the high technology and automation that's taking place. MNC is coming with FDI. They're not going to create employment generation in India. They're going to create very few employment, Unicorns will generate some employment, but again, it's at the margin, You're talking about, a workforce of about 500 million, we're not talking about, a small country where you need only 5 or 10 million jobs. For instance, if you remember in 2015, there was advertisement for 360 peons jobs in UP. And roughly about 23 lakh people applied for 360 jobs, of which 380 were PhDs, 2 lakh were BTech, MTech, and 2 lakh were MCom, BCom. So that means these PhDs, BTech, MTech, BCom, MCom were not getting jobs appropriate to their skill. They were willing to go and work as a peon in a government office. That means that we are not generating enough jobs of the kind that will give you the organized sector kind of a thing. Even the government cannot generate large number of jobs. In fact, government jobs have been stagnant because the government is under pressure to cut back on its budget. So government jobs have not increased either. Private sector, organized sector jobs have hardly increased in the last 30 years. So therefore, everybody has to go into the unorganized sector. Roughly about 14, 15 million children come into the job market every year. But net, there are only about 400, 500,000 jobs that are available in the organized sector. So hardly 2, 3, 4% of the workforce coming into the job market, the young people come into the job market every year are going to get organized sector jobs. The rest will go into the unorganized sector as a residual job creator. Also, our education is very poor. And that's why large number of people are unable to become entrepreneurs, So for instance, if you look at the annual survey of education report from 2005, it shows that 50% children in rural schools in the 5th class cannot read second class textbook, cannot do second class maths, cannot do second class reading, So reading, writing, and maths in the 5th class is effectively that of the second standard. So these children will drop out. They'll never be able to do a modern job in an organized sector, and therefore they will remain poor. So India is assured of 50% poverty for the next 50 years unless we reform our education today. And if we don't reform our education today, then this will continue for another year as the delays. So we are not giving enough, attention to our education, and that's why we're not creating enough entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs who can create jobs. Second point is that the micro units cannot, are in deep trouble. They cannot reform themselves. They cannot suddenly pull themselves up by the bootstrap. Our government has lumped together the MSME, micro, small, and medium. That is absolutely a wrong way to go about it. The micro sector is very different from small and medium. Micro sector, the average employment is 1.7. The average capital would be about 5 lakhs of rupees, whereas small and medium would be in crores. So therefore, what happens is when we declare policies for MSME, the small and medium get the benefit, but not the micro sector. So we have to have a ministry separately for micro and separately for small and medium. Now the micro sector, what do they need? If we are to generate employment of good kind, in the micro sector, they need technology, they need marketing, and they need finance. So the whole attention has to be on the micro sector. Now, in the pandemic, in the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, we have changed the definition of MSME. So even small and medium have become micro. So they will take away all the benefits that are being given to the micro sector. And the micro sector will not be able to get the loans, etc., from the banks, etc. All will go to the small and medium sector. So we have to focus our attention on the micro sector. That is when jobs will be generated. Jobs will not be generated by the organized sector. Jobs will be not generated by the small and medium sector very much. It's the micro sector, the 6 crore where the jobs will be. So that is where the dynamism has to be created. Then we have to create dynamism in our agriculture also. And that is where 45% of our workforce at the moment is. Now, a large number of farmers are small farmers. 85% are small farmers who are in trouble because they don't actually, they're not able to retain the surplus that they produce because the price they get in the market is not the right price for them. And because the right price is not there, therefore they are always in debt. And these small and marginal farmers, if you look at the surveys, 40% are saying that, we are not getting any profit out of it and we want to leave farming. When they leave farming, where will they go? Because the organized sector is not generating jobs, the unorganized sector is a marginal sector. So therefore, there's a crisis of employment in agriculture, there's a crisis of employment in the micro sector. These are what need to be addressed. Unfortunately, our focus of policy is entirely on the large scale sector, and then to a certain extent, the small and medium sector. So those sectors which can generate employment, which need to be dynamic, they are not dynamic. And the bills that have been brought about by the government are actually the wrong bills as far as the small farmers are concerned. Where the small farmers are indebted, they're already in the grip of traders, in the grip of the bankers, so they don't have the choice. They don't have the freedom to market. They're always going to sell to them. So what we needed to do was to see how the small farmers could be, taken out of the grip of the traders and so on. These bills will actually bring in the corporates. So the corporates will use the traders themselves as aggregators. So the small farmer will suffer even further as a result of these bills. So therefore, the government is not following the right policies, whether it be the farming, whether it be the micro sector, and these are the sectors that need to be made dynamic. And this notion that we'll convert the unorganized sector into organized sector, I think we just need to give that up altogether at this moment, focus on the unorganized sector and see how they can become dynamic,
I think a lot of points, sir, and well, the questions will go actually diverse. So I'll not go into that. I will in fact try to conclude now the discussion with just last question. That is again very different. I hope you would like the question to answer. Is that this is a vast question again. I don't know how I put it in a short frame. FDI we're talking about, a lot of monies that are coming now to India. If we see the Chinese model or Japanese model, they also attract FDI. But if you see, they create their own version of Facebook. They create their own version of Google. And they don't do it just because they don't want to, they don't want others to enter into the country, because they want to ensure that the wealth that is created through the industrialization in their country stays back within the boundary. They do not go out of the country. Means, if India will be witnessing industrialization, do we have a mechanism or I won't call it a protectionist mechanism, but do we have a mechanism to finance our own innovations, whether that is by private sector or government sector, but also to protect the wealth within the nation? The wealth should stay within the nation and it should again bring prosperity to the people of the nation. Now, how do we create wealth within the nation while we allow FDI? But my concern and query is that it should not happen that the big corporations come and invest here in India and then they suck the profit and take back to their own land. Now, we need FDI to create employment. How do we protect the wealth creation that we do in our country? With this, I will request also for the closing remarks from you.
So, FDI cannot be thought of as creating employment. You see, when the FDI comes in, say, for instance, into e-commerce, then that FDI is going to displace a lot of small traders, etc. And the loss of employment there will be far greater than the gain in employment that these, Walmart or Flipkart or Amazon, etc. will generate. So, forget the idea that FDI will generate employment in the economy and will lead the economy to full employment. It has to be in the micro sector. It has to be in agriculture where you have to generate employment. It's not going to be through FDI. Now, FDI should be for technology because there are technologies that we don't produce. And that is where the real problem is. India is lagging far behind in technology. because our education system is very, very poor and our industry does not spend on R&D. Unless we spend on R&D, R&D will not happen. And education has to be of high standard for it to happen. Take, for instance, the RCEP. We were about to sign the regional cooperation agreement, and the day before we withdrew. The reason is we realized that if we join RCEP, China will take advantage of it. If we don't join RCEP, then we are out of the big trading bloc that the RCEP has created. So either way, we are losing. And we've seen that in the free trade agreements that we've signed, that those countries with whom we've signed the free trade agreement, they have taken advantage and their exports have increased, but our exports to them have not increased. So our deficit in trade account remains very large. So the reason is technology. We are not developing, not only we are not developing high technology, even in low, very, very low technology. I mean, like Ganesh Murthy and Manjha and Gulal, our cultural symbols are coming from China. The reason is China has spent enormously on R&D. It has created world-class universities, whereas in India, we have lagged far behind. Even our IITs are not generating any world-class technologies, and that is because, you see, technology development has been given a short shift in the country. It is not being given support that is required to be given to technology development. So our industry is not developing. Public sector, which used to develop technology before 1991, now is not developing technology because after 1991, it was told that it has to generate a profit. And the easiest way to generate profit is to cut back on R&D. So we are repeatedly importing technology. Whatever technology is here, we are like automobile sector. It's all the outside car manufacturers who are coming in and giving us the technology, whether it be in mobile phones, it's the outside companies that are coming in and installing their plants, etc. here. So look at China. They developed 5G technology and the best 5G technology, and even the US is afraid of it. So it's trying to curtail Huawei technology by talking about security reasons, etc. Now security reasons may be there, but Huawei technology is good. We have neither developed the 2G technology, nor the 3G, nor the 4G, and China leaped ahead to 5G technology. You look at the space, etc. So we have not focused on technology. Unless we focus on technology, we will lag behind in globalization. You see, globalization is all about technology. Those who have the technology will produce cheap and will be able to sell it cheap and will be able to capture market. So large amount of our market has been captured, and that's why we have a huge trade deficit with China. So the problem is education, and it has to be a strategy. China had a 30-year strategy of improving technology. We have not done that. We have not upgraded our education system, and I must say that our education policies have been terrible. The education policies have been undermining our universities, undermining our higher education system rather than building it up. We have separated teaching from research. So most of the institutions are for teaching, not for research. And even IITs, students go, they mug up in coaching centers, etc. They do well, but they don't go in for R&D. They go in for management after doing IITs, or they go abroad. So therefore, the talent which is retained here in India is very limited. And that's why R&D is very weak. And that's why industry doesn't do R&D. So we have to move up that chain. Government must move to boost R&D in the country. So saying that, we are going to, increase our tariffs, etc., that is not going to help very much, in this process. It has to be a race to develop technology, race to improve education. And this is a long-term thing. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. Now, you see, our universities where the basic research is done, they're all under, pressure. Therefore, how will you do basic research? An institution like JNU, which was considered to be one of the best, it has been demolished in the last 5 years. So what kind of research can go on if you demolish your best universities? My take would be that we have to have a long-term strategy of, if we want India to be great, then, we can't copy. We can't copy China. We can't copy Japan. They are at a different level of development. We can't copy USA. We have to have our own unique model. We can learn from what they have done, but we cannot copy them. So this idea, this notion that we can make Bombay into Shanghai, now that's long gone. People used to say we should copy China. That's also long gone because we have not been able to do that in the last 30 years. And we are not going to be able to become great by copying some other nation's model of development. So what is our model of development? where we promote the micro sector, we promote agriculture. And for that, we don't need foreign resources. You see, for developing technology for the micro sector, for giving credit to the micro sector, we don't need foreign capital. If you look at it, India's investment peaked in 2012-13 at 36.5%. And after that, it has fallen. Why did it fall? Because demand was short and therefore production could not take place, and capacity utilization has been low at about 70-75%. If capacity utilization remains low, then investment doesn't increase. And because of the pandemic, the investment fell further, capacity utilization fell further. So we have to boost our internal investment. Our FDI is only about 7-8% of the total investment. So that cannot help us boost investment. That will not help us boost technology, because foreign direct investment will not give up technology. They'll only bring whatever they will bring and keep it to themselves. They will develop the technology. Indian technology will not develop as a result of that. So we have to make internal efforts at how to boost our technology, how to boost our investment. And for that, we have to generate demand. Now, in the pandemic, demand fell because large number of people have lost income. So how do we generate demand? Government must step forward, because private sector is not going to do it. It has to be the government which has to put money into the hands of the poor people, so that demand start getting generated. And that when the demand start getting generated, the demand for micro sector will also get generated. They will begin to grow, and that will lead to growth of the organized sector also. So the government must go for demand side policy. Government has gone for supply side policies. Like for instance, in 2019, it cut the corporate tax rate, expecting that the corporate sector will start investing more. But because of lack of demand, they simply use that money, the extra money they got because of tax cut, to simply reduce their debt. But investment did not go up, right? Even now, for instance, now there are a lot of supply side policies like these 3 farm laws, the labor law changes, etc. These are not going to deliver, because you see, investment requires capacity utilization to go up. Now, in January 2021, when the government said the rate of growth had come up to 1.3%, the capacity utilization according to RBI data was only 63%. Now, at 63% capacity utilization, industry is not going to begin to invest in a big way. So unless it comes up to 80-85%, the big investment will not take place. So government must generate demand. It is like saying, I keep saying that if my house is burning, and then somebody says, okay, now next year we'll buy a fire tender, we'll set up a fire station near your house. By then the house will be burned. Now the need is to throw water today when the house is burning, not that next year, So supply side responses in the present context will not take place. Even they will not take place in the medium to long term. So what you need today is short-term measures to boost demand in the economy. And in even industries, CII, Mr. Forbes was saying that we need to spend a lot more. And the fiscal deficit, which is a constraint, that fiscal deficit need not be a constraint, because banks are flush with funds. They have 4 lakh crore of surplus liquidity. According to RBI, government can borrow from there and spend. The stock market, people are making a lot of money. A small percentage tax can be put on the daily transactions that are taking place in the stock market, and money can be generated out of that. So there are many ways of generating immediate funds. In the slightly medium term, you can have wealth taxation, you can have estate duty and gift taxation to generate funds. But this idea that we'll generate funds from the indirect taxes by using petroleum goods taxes, that is the wrong way to go about it. So I think it's the entire set of policies that the government is following is on the wrong premise. It must reform, must look at demand side issues at the present, not look at the supply side, because the supply side will in fact actually create further problems, because farmers are protesting, labor of the public sector is protesting, labor in other factories is protesting because it's not getting jobs. Now, if you have so much protest, then the economy will not flourish. Investment will not come in that case. So this whole idea that we'll attract investment by creating a good business climate, but if there's a lot of protest in the country, then the climate will not be good. And the capital will not come, capital will not get invested, capital will start going out. So therefore, we have to have demand side policy. We have to see that everybody is part of it. There's no alienation being created among the farmers and the workers. That needs to be checked. So unless we do that and create the proper healthy environment for investment, the economy will continue to flounder. Our rate of growth will never go into double digit at this rate,
Thank you. I think a lot of food for thought, sir. I'll conclude now the discussion. And I think this discussion needs a series in future, I'll be more than happy to have you in a series on to discuss on some specifics within which we are discussing, sir, under the broad spectrum. So I'll just conclude now. Thank you so much for being with us, sir, and sharing your knowledge. Now, a lot of points. The last, I think, point that initially we started is the economy bouncing back. Yes, the economy is bouncing back gradually, but not in a full. So we are not, as sir said, that we are not bounced back in a complete sense at the 2009 or 9 level. 19 level. So that is one. The second part is the informal sector should not be seen like the way we are seeing it. And it should not be that the formal sector is converting into informal sector, converting into formal sector. There has to be a different kind of approach to see to it. And then sir is saying all the policies that we have had, like demonetization and GST, may not or might not have served the purpose of their launching. Now, the last part that sir talked about is the demand supply policy. The policies that we are taking, we need to see that how they come from the demand supply side. So I'll not repeat much because I would request all our viewers to watch the show again.
But
I think,
one more thing,
Yeah.
about technology and education. That's the critical thing for the future. If we are to become, worldwide competitive, then we need to think about our technology development, about education, and we need to spend far more resources on our education.
Indeed, no doubt and no exception to this law. All the societies or economies of nations which have prospered, they have followed this basic fundamental rule. And whichever nation, whether it is United Kingdom or British Americans, when they rule, or now the China or Japanese or Koreans, they have always taken these fundamentals in a right spirit and worked on them, with the equal amount of passion and investment. So with this, we will sum up today's discussion. Thank you so much for watching us. Do subscribe to our Facebook and YouTube channel for many such sessions to come.